Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, today we're going to do a little bit of discussion around our Torah portion, Vayikra, this new book of the Torah, the third book. And so we begin. It's a parsha filled with laws of sacrifice. And it starts with these words that I'm going to put in the chat box. Very simple words you might think are ordinary. The question that we're looking at today is, how and what do we learn from the Torah? How do we learn and what do we learn? Two distinct and interconnected questions. The Parsha begins with these words, Vayikra el Moshe, Vayedaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed lemor. The Lord, God, called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. And off we go into a litany of how to make sacrifices. But we pause at our first verse because it's an important verse that brings out all kinds of thoughts, at least for the rabbis. But before we go to the rabbis, before we go to the Talmud, before we rewind back some 2,000 years, what do you think? How and what does the Torah teach us here with this simple verse? Let your minds be creative. Are you as creative as the rabbis were? Surely 2,000 years later, we're more creative, no? Well, we'll find out. Vayikra el Moshe. God called to Moses, Vayedaber Adonai elav. God spoke to him, Me'ohel moed, from the tent of meeting, saying, ... Okay. If you have any thoughts, what does this mean? Put them in the chat box. Or I'm even going to let you unmute yourselves. If you have something to say, you can unmute yourself. I'll pause here for a moment before we jump into the Talmud. Does anyone have any thoughts? What does this teach us?
There are many ways of speaking, because there are three different words used for a mode of communication.
Wonderfully picked up, a literary interpretation of this verse. We have Vayikra, God called, Vayedaber, God spoke, and then at the end, Lemor, saying. And then we go into our other verses about sacrifices. And Emily says, well, it seems that we are spoken to when we are in the tent of meeting, the place where we come together. Both of you have picked up on the two essential interpretations that we're about to look at. One about who is standing, who is hearing and listening to God, and what's with all of these sayings, utterances, speakings? You all are as brilliant as the rabbis. They say that for us Jews, asking a question or making a statement that's already been said is a brilliant thing. It's not coming up with the newest, coolest Twitter feed. It's actually looking back and asking a question that some of our rabbis have asked before. So I am going to share my screen with you all, and we're going to look at this beautiful page that I have colored for you all in shiny colors of yellow and pink. And we're going to look at this paragraph first. Can you folks see it? See it well enough? Give me a thumbs up, Willa, if you see it. All right, and Jeff too, so we're 2 for 2 here. All right. So here it says, Amar Mar, the master said, in that Baraita cited above, that when the Torah says, we're not going to get into too many details here, what's this and that. Let's try to get into the essence of this. So the Torah says, and he called to Moses, Vayikra el Moshe. Our first three words, he called to Moses. It means that Moses and all of the Jewish people were standing and listening. Emily, you're brilliant. How did you know that all these people were there with Moses? Well, that's what you would agree with Mar, that we all come together around the tent of meeting. It is called the tent of meeting after all. And it's not only Moses meeting with God, but it's Moses and all the people meeting with God. Well, guess what? Well, first of all, the Gemara, also another way of saying the Talmud, suggests that this supports the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, as Rabbi Elazar said, that when the Torah says, and he called to Moses, it means that Moses and all of the Jewish people were standing and listening. And the verse comes only to accord deference to Moses. Lechalek lo kavod leMoshe. So everybody is standing there, but we say only Moses' name because Moses is the head honcho, and we give him the due respect that he deserves. That's what Mar says. That's what Rabbi Elazar says. But guess what? We would be boring if we thought that was the only opinion, because the next paragraph raises an objection. No, you silly Mar, you silly Rabbi Elazar, that's not how this works. Here we go, interpreting the verse with the words, why did it say lo? Why did it say elav, unto him? That they come to interpret that it means Moses alone heard God's voice, and all of the Jewish people did not hear it. So was it Moses? Was it all the people? We have a machloket. We have an argument. Okay, let's try to rectify this, the Talmud says. This is not difficult. That's their way of saying, no, we have this seeming difference, but we'll try to smooth it out. This case where everyone heard God's voice, that was at Sinai. That case when Moses alone heard God's voice, that was at the tent of meeting. So at Sinai, all the Israelites heard God, and at the tent of meeting, it was just Moses. Or, if you wish, let's get even more creative, we can make up another resolution. This is not difficult. Let's smooth this out. When God addressed Moses by calling to him, everyone heard. That which God subsequently communicated by speaking, Moses alone heard. Did you hear that, Willa? Did you hear that? Yes, you did. You did hear that. Moses, when it says calling, God called to Moses, that's calling to Moses. Everybody was hearing that. When God was speaking to Moses, that was just for Moses alone. So we can understand that. We can stop there, but there's more. So let's go to this next piece of Talmud, way down here. What else can the Torah teach us from this seemingly innocuous first line of the book of Vayikra, all about talking and speaking and saying? So Vayikra el Moshe vayidaber. And he called, the verse says, and he called unto Moses, and the Lord spoke unto him from within the tent of meeting, saying. That's our first verse, right, that we've been talking about. Why does the verse mention calling before speaking? So now we have a nuance on Willa's question. Why calling first and then speaking? And God did not speak to him at the outset? Why didn't God just say, Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor? Tell me, have you ever heard a verse that started like that? Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. I mean, I don't know how many, but there are hundreds of verses in the Torah that start like that. Why did we start with Vayikra? God called out to Moses, not God spoke to Moses. And I love these words, Limda Torah Derech Eretz. Right over here. Limda Torah Derech Eretz. Let me make that even bigger so you can see it properly. So the Torah is teaching. You still see it? Yeah? The Torah is teaching Derech Eretz. Here they translate that as etiquette. It's an interesting translation. They're teaching etiquette. So that's what Derech Eretz you can understand that to mean. It's the way of the world, the way Derech of the land, and it's how you should behave, how you should act in the world. The Torah is teaching etiquette. A person should not say anything to another unless he calls him first. Okay, so you call someone first, and then you can say something. What does that exactly mean? Let's get into it. This supports the opinion of Rabbi Hanina. As Rabbi Hanina said, a person should not say anything to another unless he calls him first. With regard to the term concluding the verse, saying, right, lemor, Rabbi Musia, grandson of Rabbi Masya, aren't these fantastic names? Said in the name of Rabbi Musia the Great. From where is it derived with regard to one who tells another some matter that it is incumbent upon the latter not to say it to others until the former explicitly says to him, go and tell others? I'll explain this in a minute if you're not following. And it is stated, and the Lord spoke to him from within the tent of meeting, saying, lemor. Lemor is a contraction of lo emor, meaning do not say. One must be given permission before transmitting information. Okay, so someone tells you something, and you're actually not allowed to share it with someone else. Here's the halacha. And you're not allowed to share it with someone else until they tell you that it's okay. From where is it derived with regard to one who tells another some matter? It is incumbent upon the latter to not say it. If one tells something to another, the latter should not repeat the information to others unless the former explicitly instructs him, go and tell others. A fascinating read of lemor. They take this word lemor, which means saying, and they break it down to lo emor, do not say. They totally reinterpret it to mean its opposite, not saying, but do not say. All right, we've had a few comments since we began, and Paula says, God first must get Moses' attention, then he will talk. I like that. You gotta get a person's attention before you give them some important instructions. That's right, Susan. You too. In Yiddish, derech eretz means respect, exactly, and that comes straight from the Hebrew and from the Talmud. The Talmud did come before Yiddish. I hate to break it to you, Taubens. But Yiddish did not precede the Talmud, as much as it feels that way, that Yiddish is that ancient. But exactly, that's exactly the connection. One of the things I love about Yiddish is how infused the Hebrew and the traditions are. And Lynn has said, so assume it is told in confidence. And Amy Wenger brought up HIPAA laws. So you cannot share things that are told to you. Now, just remember where we started. If I have to remind you, I will. But we had this seemingly innocuous verse that I posted again. Vayikra al Moshe vayidaber Adonai elav me'ol moed lemor. God called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. Without even getting into the journey of sacrifices that is most of our parsha, look at what we have learned from a few simple words and drawing deeply from the source of Torah that is our tradition, as well as the Torah, the living Torah that began with Willa and Emily's comments at the beginning, themselves drawing from that wealth of Torah that is so ancient. Part of our DNA. So may we be filled with Torah in our lives, learning the how and the what of Torah in our learning and in our derech eretz, in our respect, etiquette, and behavior in the world. Amen.